Hi everyone, this is TOC number 5 for Unit 3. For these notes, you should either be working in Schoology by editing the document, or you should be have it printed. I know not everyone has a printer, so then if you don't have one, then you should use the document within Schoology and edit it. We are working with graphs, and by now you should have graph paper. So if you when you are graphing the line, just make sure you're doing it on your own graph paper if you do not have a printer and you did not print this out. The learning target for these notes is I can graph a line using different methods. So our essential question is, how do I graph a line using different methods? Okay, some prior knowledge that you need before taking these notes is you need to know that the x-intercept is where the graph crosses the x-axis. It's important for you to note that y is 0 when it crosses the x-axis. And then for the y-intercept, that's where the graph crosses the y-axis. And so this is the opposite. The x value is 0 if we are at the y-intercept. Okay, how do I graph using intercepts? So we're going to just plug in 0 for y to get the x-intercept for this equation that we have right here. So to get the x-intercept, we're going to plug in 0 for y. So I have 2x plus 0 equals 4. So I have 2x equals 4. And when I divide by 2 on both sides, I get x equals 2. So that's my x-intercept. So that's where I'm going to put a point on the x-axis at positive 2. And then now in red, I'm going to do my y-intercept. And this is where I'm going to put 0 for my x value. Okay, so when you do that, you just get y equals 4, and so that is your y-intercept. So you need to put a point on the y-axis at positive 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. And then we're going to go ahead and make this a line. This is the only time in which you only need 2 points. And in other cases where we want you to have at least 3 points, even possibly 4. But this is the only chance in which you can just have 2 points. So now I'm going to draw a line through those points to the best of my ability. And there we go. How do I graph using a table? Okay, so this table, they have given us our x values. In the future, I'm going to show you what happens if they don't give us our x values. But what we're going to do is we're going to plug in the x value and then see what we get as our y. And so that's going to give us our ordered pair. Okay, so if I plug in -3 into my equation, and I'm going to do that in blue over here. So if I plug in -3, then I get -6 minus 3y equals 6. I need to add 6 to both sides to get y by itself. So when I do that, I get -3y equals 12. And then I need to divide by -3 divided by -3, and so I have y equals -4. So my y value is -4. Okay, so now I'm going to erase so that you can see me do the next one and that we have room for the next one. Okay, so we're going to do this next one in red. Okay, so I'm going to plug in 0 for x, so it should look like this. And now I have negative 3y equals 6. I got to divide by negative 3 on both sides. So we get y equals negative 2. So I'm going to go ahead and plug in the negative 2 for my y values. And then let's do the last one. I'm going to use green for this next one. Okay, now we're plugging in positive 3. Okay, so 2 times positive 3 minus 3y equals 6. So that gives me 6 minus 3y equals 6. Okay, I got to subtract 6 on both sides because the 6 is a positive. So minus 6 minus 6, that's going to give me negative 3y equals 0. Okay, if negative 3y equals 0, then I know that y equals 0. So when x is 3, y is 0. Okay, so this gives me my ordered pairs. If you want, you can write your ordered pairs off to the side if that makes it a little bit easier for you. So my first ordered pair is negative 3, negative 4. My second one is 0, negative 2, and then my third one is positive 3, 0. Okay, so now I'm going to plot my points, and I'm going to use these colors to plot my points. So I start at my origin, and I'm going to go to negative 3, and then I go down to negative 4, and so there's my first point. Now let's plot my second point. So I'm at 0, negative 2, so I know that I'm going to stay on the y-axis because my x is 0. Whoops, sorry about that. And so I'm at 0, negative 2, so right here. And then my last point is positive 3, 0. So I go over to positive 3, and then I don't go up or down because my y is 0. Okay, so now I need to put a line through these 3 points. And I'm going to use yellow to do that. And you want the line to look like has the same slope throughout. You don't need to plot any more points, but you want to just make sure that you are keeping the line straight as you're plotting those points. How do I graph from slope-intercept form? Slope-intercept form is y equals mx plus b, where the m is the slope and the b is the y-intercept. To graph a line from an equation in slope-intercept form, graph the y-intercept first. So we're going to graph the b first, and then use the slope, and that's m, to find additional points on the line. Remember, when graphing, you begin at b and move, which is m, in the direction that m tells you. Okay, so right here we see an equation that we need to graph. It's in slope-intercept form, which is y equals mx plus b. So in this case, our b is 2. Okay, so that means since our y-intercept, it needs to be on our y-axis. So I'm going to have a point on the y-axis at positive 2. Okay, and then our m, our slope, is 3. And this is positive, and slope is rise over run. So if we wanted to, we could write this as 3 over 1. And so we are going to rise 3 and run 1. So we're going to need to go over 3. Whoops, sorry about that. We're going to need to go up 3 and run 1. Okay, so let's do our next point. So if we're right here at our y-intercept, if we go up 3, so 1, 2, 3, and over 1, then we have a point right here. So now let's think about it. We need one more point because we want to have at least 3 points when we are graphing. And if we are at our first point that we plotted, so our y-intercept, and if we want to plot a point to the left of it, so going in the other direction, then we need to go over 1 and down 3. Okay, so here is our other point. And you could keep doing this so that you could get more points and it would just be easier for you to draw your line. But we ask for you to have just at least 3 points. Okay, so now we can put a line through these points. And we're done. There we go. All right, so this next equation is a fraction, so it's going to be a little bit different. We still have slope-intercept form, so our m is -2/3, and then our y-intercept is -1. So first, let's work with our y-intercept, so it's -1. So on the y-axis, we're going to put a point at -1. And then this time, our slope is negative and it's also a fraction. So we're going to have a negative slope, and we need to remember that slope is rise over run. But in this case, we're going to be going down 2 and then over to the right 3. Okay, so starting from our first point at our y-intercept, we go down 2 and then over to the right 3. So right there. And then down 2 over to the right 3. Okay, so we have at least 3 points, which is good in my books. However, if we want to add another point over to the left side, so on the other side of the y-axis, then what we would need to do in this case is we would need to go up 2 over to the left 3. So we're doing the opposite since we're going in that other direction. So up 2 over to the left 3, up 2 over to the left 3. Okay, so now we have 5 points, which is plenty, and we can go ahead and draw a line through our points. And so there is our equation graphed. All right, so now we are on the third page, and we are going to answer the question, how do I graph horizontal and vertical lines? So the acronym that we use for vertical lines is VUX, and that should be helpful to you because it starts with a V, so VUX. V stands for vertical, so that's telling us the type of line that we're going to have. U stands for undefined because we're going to have an undefined slope. And then X stands for X, but then also X-axis. Because whenever you have a vertical line, it's going to say X equals, and whatever the number is where it crosses through the X-axis. Okay, when we have horizontal lines, the acronym that we're going to use is HOY, H-O-Y. And H stands for horizontal because it makes that type of line. O is actually a 0. Okay, so if you want to put a line through it, if that is helpful for you, it stands for 0 because you're going to have a 0 slope. And then Y stands for y-axis. So whenever you have a horizontal line, it'll say y equals a number, and whatever that number is, that is where the line goes through the y-axis. So let's go ahead and try this out. So this first one, we have x equals 4. So this is a vertical line because it says x equals. So we have VUX, V-U-X. Okay, so my slope is undefined. That's what that U stands for. So I'm going to write undefined right here. And then my y-intercept, I'm actually not going to have one because this line is not going to go through the y-axis, so none. Okay, so then I am going to go over to my graph, and I'm going to go to the x-axis, and I'm going to go to +4, which is 1, 2, 3, 4, which is right here, and I'm just going to draw a line that goes through to the top, and to the bottom. Make sure to draw arrows on it because it is continuous. And that right there is my line for x equals 4. It's a vertical line. It goes up and down. Okay, let's try this next one. So this one says y equals -3. So this is going to create a horizontal line. So we're going to use hoi. And our O in hoi is actually a 0. So we're going to have 0 slope. And then our y-intercept is going to be this number that is on the other side of the equal sign. So -3 is our y-intercept. Okay, so now I need to go to -3. I need to go to my y-axis and then go to -3. And -3 is right here. And now I'm going to draw a line that goes from left to right. And there is my line for y equals -3. All right, so let's do some practice. This equation is in slope-intercept form, and that is y equals mx plus b. So it tells us our slope and it tells us our y-intercept. If you want, if it's a little helpful for you, I would write a 1 in front of that x. So our slope is -1, so we can go ahead and write that in for m. And then our y-intercept is 3. Okay, so when you're given a slope-intercept form and you are asked to graph points, what you need to do is you first, so step number 1 is to plot the y-intercept, and you will be doing that on the y-axis. And then your second step is to use the slope to plot more points, because you want to make sure that you have at least 3 points. Okay, so first let's go to the y-axis and we go to +3. So we've got 1 point. Now we're going to use our slope to plot more points. Okay, so slope is rise over run. Okay, so slope is rise over run, and if we wanted to, we could put a 1 under this -1. So this is telling us that we actually need to go down and then go to the right. So this has a negative slope, and that makes sense because it has a negative in front of the number. So I'm at my y-axis and I'm at +3. And so I need to go down 1 over 1 to the right, down 1 over 1. Okay, we have 3 points, and in my book, that is good for me. However, if you want to keep doing more points so that it's easier for you to draw your line, you absolutely can. So that's what I'm going to do. So I go down 1, right 1, down 1, right 1, down 1, right 1, down 1, right 1. Down 1, right 1. Okay, when you do it on the other side, you want to make sure that you're like doing the opposite. So you would go up 1, left 1, up 1, left 1, up 1, left 1, up 1, left 1. Okay, and now we can draw our line. So I'm going to draw that in green, and just make sure you put arrows at the end. Okay, so this next one is in slope-intercept form. However, we are working with a fraction. So we're just going to treat this one a little differently. So for our slope, we have 3/4, and that means that we are going to rise 3 points on the graph and then run 4 points on the graph. So we're going to go up 3 since it's a +3, and then to the right 4. Our y-intercept is +1. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go over to the graph, and I'm going to put a point at +1 on the y-axis. And then now I'm going to create at least 2 more points on my graph. So with this slope, I need to rise 3. So 1, 2, 3. I'm right here. I put a small little dot right there. And then I need to run for 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so that is my second point. I'm going to use my eraser real quick to get rid of that small little point I created. Okay, I need to plot another point. However, I can't do it to the right over here because then I would be off my graph. Okay, so I need to do it in the other direction. So what we're going to do is we're going to do the opposite. So we're going to go down 3 and then to the left 4, since when we were going to the right, we rose 3 and we ran to the right 4. Okay, so we're just going to do the opposite. So I go down 1, 2, 3, and then I go to the left 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, and there is my third point. I'm going to erase that small little dot that I put. Okay, so now we're good to put a line through these points. Hopefully yours is straighter than mine. And just make sure that you put arrows at the end of your line. So this next one that we are doing is not in slope intercept form, so it doesn't have y equals mx plus b. So what we need to do is we need to just kind of move it around a little bit in order for it to make sense. We want to make sure that we just have y equals, not 2y equals. So we need to divide by 2 on both sides. And then when we do that, we now have y equals -3. Okay, so you should see with this that we are going to want to make sure that we use HOY, H-O-Y, because this is going to create a horizontal line because it says y equals. And so our slope is 0 because this O stands for 0. So we have 0 slope. And then we our y-intercept is -3 because it says y equals -3. So that's our y-intercept. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my y-axis and go to -3. And then I just need to draw a line through this, a horizontal line. Because remember, we used HOY, and H stands for horizontal. So we have a horizontal line. So there we go. Okay, so this next practice one is super, super important. So just make sure that you are including this one in your notes. So this gives us an equation and it wants us to find the slope and then also the y-intercept and graph it. But it's telling us to graph by using the intercepts, okay? So if you don't do that, you're only going to get partial credit because we want to make sure that we see the work for you finding the x-intercept and also the y-intercept, okay? So for this one, in order to find the x-intercept, I have to plug in 0 for my y, so for like the other variable. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and do that. 3x plus 5 times 0 equals 15. When I do that, I get 3x equals 15. So we divide by 3 on both sides, we get x equals 5. Okay, so my x-intercept, where it crosses the x-axis, is at x equals 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, so I have a point right here. And then now when we do the y-intercept, we're going to plug in 0 for x. So we have 3 times 0 plus 5 equals 15. Okay, and so, whoops, I forgot to write my y. Okay, so then we have 5y equals 15. Divide by 5 on both sides, and so then we get y equals 3. So that we need to go over to the y-axis, and at +3 we need to put a point. Okay, so now we have 2 points on the graph. Okay, I also want to find my slope because it is asking for my slope. Okay, so what you could do is you could start at your y-intercept. You could do this 2 different ways. So you could start at your y-intercept and count how many I'm going to use yellow. You could count how many points you go down, and that's your rise, but it needs to be negative since you're going down. So 1, 2, 3. So my rise is a -3. It's negative because I'm going down. And then my run, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's positive because I'm going to the right. Right is positive. So that's my slope. There's also another way in which you could do this, and you could rewrite the equation that is given. I'm going to do this in green, so we could rewrite this and put it in slope-intercept form. And how we do that is we've just got to move some things around because we want to make sure we have y equals. Okay, so if I subtract 3x on both sides, then I have 5y equals -3x plus 15. Okay, and then I need to divide by 5 on both sides because I want y by itself. So divide by 5, divide by 5. When you do that, these cancel out. And so this would simplify to y equals -3 over 5x plus 3, because we have 15 divided by 5, so plus 3. Okay, so I'm going to rewrite that, and I'm going to write that in blue. I know that there's a lot of writing. So if I transformed this into slope-intercept form, it would read as y equals -3/5 x plus 3. So there's two different ways you could do it. You could do it by looking at the graph and looking at rise over run, or you can just move the equation around and make sure it's in slope-intercept form. Okay, so now we have our slope, and it is -3/5, and then our y-intercept is +3. All right, so for this last one, I'm going to graph by table, and I'm going to show you how to do that. Before I do that, this is not in slope-intercept form, so that's the first thing that I want to do is I want to get it in a form so that it reads y equals mx plus b. So the first thing I need to do is add 2x to both sides. So when I do that, I get positive 2x minus 9, and then on this side I have 3y. So I'm going to divide by 3 on this whole side, and you want to make sure that you have it in simplest form. So in simplest form, it is y equals 2/3 x, and then -9 divided by 3 gives me -3. Okay, so this is in slope-intercept form. Okay, so now I'm going to graph by table, and I know that you probably can graph this by just looking at slope-intercept form. However, I want you to graph by table because it's important to be able to see how the function works, and also do the work. However, and also the reason why I want you to do it is because if you are asked this like on a test or in the future on an SOL, you won't get full credit, and even on the SOL you won't get any credit if you don't show the work of the table. Okay, so the first thing that I want you to do is draw a function table, so it kind of looks like a big H. And then on the left column we're going to have our x's, and we're going to have our y's, and we want to have our rule in the middle. So 2/3 x minus 3. Okay, so here's the thing. If you have a fraction, then you're going to use your denominator to help you figure out what your x values should be. Okay, so what your input should be. If you have a fraction, you're going to use your denominator, and our denominator is -3 because we want to make sure that we have whole numbers on our graph. You don't want to have decimals on your graph because then you're going to have to be plotting like in the middle of nowhere, and it's just going to be really confusing and unnecessary. So that is why we are going to make sure that we use our denominator to select our input. Okay, so you're going to use your denominator, and you want to use the negative of your denominator, so -3. we're going to use 0, and then we're going to use the positive version of our denominator, so positive 3. So that's our input. Okay, so when you insert negative 3 into this rule, what you will get, and I can show you your work, or you can do this in your calculator, you will get negative 2 minus 3, and when you do that, you get negative 5, okay? So I'm going to write the negative 2 minus 3 right here, and we get negative 5 as our y. Okay, so now let's go ahead and insert 0 in, okay? All right, so 2/3 times 0 minus 3, that's going to give you 0, so now our y, our output, is negative 3. And then lastly, we are going to insert 3. Okay, so 2/3 times 3 minus 3, the dividing by 3 and multiplying by 3 is going to cancel out, so we have 2 minus 3, that gives me negative 1. Sorry, I just started using a different color. Okay, so now we're going to plot our points. So if we write our x and then our y, that gives us our ordered pairs, so negative 3, negative 5. For this one, we have 0, negative 3, positive 3, negative 1. Okay, so let's go ahead and plot those points. So first I'm going to start at the origin, go over to negative 3, down to 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So that's my first one. Okay, I'm at 0, and then now I'm going to go to negative 3. So here is my second point. And then my last point, I'm at the origin. I'm going to go over to positive 3 and down 1, and there is my third point. Okay, great. So now I can draw a line through my graph. And then I just want to make sure that I go ahead and write my slope. So we found that our slope is 2/3. And then our y-intercept, and as you can see on the graph as well, is negative 3. Okay guys, so when we were graphing by table for this one, we used our denominator to help us because it's a fraction. However, if you don't have a fraction as your slope, then what you're going to use, and I'm going to write this in green, is you would use negative 1, 0, positive 1. However, if you have a fraction like we did for this one, then you're going to use the negative version of your denominator, 0, and the positive version of your denominator. We're going to get a lot more practice with this, so if this is all new to you and a little confusing, that's okay, because we're going to get even more practice with it. Thanks for watching. I hope you have a great rest of your day.